freedom struggles that have defined the political, social, and economic landscape of different nations. From Indian independence movement to the American Revolution, from French Revolution to fight against apartheid in South Africa, these movements have been instrumental in shaping the course of human history. The idea of freedom has transcended geographical boundaries, inspiring millions to fight for justice, equality, and self-determination. This essay will examine key freedom struggles around the world, analyzing their cause, course, impact on global history. Defining freedom struggles. Freedom struggles are effort made by people or group to break free from oppression, colonialism, or unjust rule. They can take many forms: non-violent protest, armed rebellions, intellectual movements, political campaigns, often rooted in resistance to foreign dominations or domestic tyranny. These struggles aim to establish self-government, equality before the law, the protection of fundamental rights. Ancient and medieval struggles. The quest for freedom is not a modern phenomenon. Its root can be traced back to ancient and medieval times. For instance, the slave rebellions in ancient Rome, such as the one led by Spartacus in 73 to 71 BCE, are early example of people fighting against oppression. Though unsuccessful, these rebellions were driven by human desire for dignity and liberty. It is a desire, it is a significance of desire for dignity and liberty. In the medieval era, several uprisings took place against feudal lords, monarchies. For example, the Peasant Revolt of 1381. Peasant Revolt of 1381 in England was a major uprising against taxation and feudal exploitation. Although it was crushed, it sowed the seed for future movements against aristocratic rule for political representation. The American Revolution 1776. The American Revolution was one of the earliest modern freedom struggles that culminated in the birth of a nation based on the principle of liberty and democracy. The American colonies revolted against British colonial rule, primarily due to taxation without representation and a desire for political autonomy. The Declaration of Independence, drafted by Thomas Jefferson in 1776, proclaimed the inherent right to life, liberty, and pursuits of happiness. The success of the American Revolution served as a beacon of hope for many oppressed societies and influenced future revolutions, including the French Revolution. The French Revolution 1789. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, was another monumental event that reshaped the world, rooted in Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The revolution sought to overthrow the oppressive monarchy and establish a republic. It was driven by the extreme socio-economic inequalities that existed before the aristocracy and the common people, coupled with widespread discontent over feudal dues and harsh taxation. The revolution not only led to the fall of the French monarchy, but also inspired a wave of democratic movements across Europe and the world. Its racial, social, and political changes, such as abolition of feudal privileges and introduction of universal male suffrage, have led a lasting legacy on the global democratic movement. However, it also highlighted the challenges of maintaining revolutionary ideals, such as the revolution eventually gave way to the authoritarian rule as Napoleon Bonaparte. Indian independence movement 1857 to 1947. One of the most remarkable and longest freedom struggle was the Indian independence movement against British colonial rule. It began with the revolt of 1857, which was largely a military uprising but later grew into full-fledged national movements. By the early 20th century, under the leadership of figures like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, the movement had gained mass participation. Gandhi's strategy of non-violent resistance, Satyagraha, became a powerful tool against British oppression. Yeah, that's a powerful tool. The Indian National Congress played a pivotal role in the struggles, advocating for self-rule, Swaraj, mobilizing millions of people to protest, strike, and civil disobedience movements like the Salt March 1930 movement culminated in India's independence in 1947, marking the end of British rule and partition of Indian subcontinent into India and Pakistan. Indian freedom struggle became an inspiration for other colonial nations in Asia and Africa fighting for independence. African freedom struggle. In Africa, the 20th century witnessed widespread movement against European colonial power. The decolonization process in Africa was largely fueled by the aftermath of World War II, as European powers weakened and the global call for self-determination grew stronger. One of the most iconic figures of African freedom struggles was Nelson Mandela, who led the fight against apartheid in South Africa. Mandela's African National Congress (ANC) fought against the racial segregation imposed by the apartheid regime. After spending 27 years in prison, Mandela became the first black president of South Africa in 1994, symbolizing the victory of justice over racial oppression. Other significant African movements include Kenya's Mau uprising 1952 to 1960 against British colonial rule, which eventually led to Kenyan independence in 1963. The Latin American Revolution in the early 19th century also saw a series of independence movement across Latin America inspired by the American and French Revolution. Key leaders like Simon Bolivar, Jose de San Martin led revolutionary armies that overthrew Spanish and Portuguese colonial rule. Bolivar, known as El Libertador, played a central role in liberating countries like Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. These movements were primarily motivated by a desire for political sovereignty and economic freedom. They also addressed the issue of social inequality, as the colonial elites of European descent had long dominated Latin American society. While many Latin American countries gained independence by the mid 1800s, the legacy of these revolutionaries continues to influence political struggle in the region, particularly regarding social justice and economic equality. Struggle against fascism and World War II. Fight against fascism during World War II 1939 to 1945 was one of the most significant freedom struggle in global history. The rise of totalitarian regime in Germany, Italy, and Japan posed a direct threat to democratic ideals and human rights. The Allied power, consisting of countries like the United States, Soviet Union, United Kingdom, fought to dismantle these regimes. End of World War II also brought about a new global order with the establishment of United Nations and the promotion of human rights international cooperation. However, the war also led to the beginning of Cold War, a protracted ideological struggle between the United States championing capitalism and democracy, and the Soviet Union advocating for communism. Decolonization and the Cold War era. After World War II, the decolonization movement gained momentum, especially in Asia and Africa. Countries like India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and many other in Africa won their independence from European colonial power. The Cold War era also saw freedom struggle in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, where superpowers often supported different factions in conflict over national sovereignty. In Vietnam War 1955 to 1975 was a significant part of this era, where the Vietnamese fought against French colonialism, and later against American intervention. Despite enormous casualties and destruction, North Vietnam eventually succeeded in unifying the country under a communist government. Modern era freedom and human rights. In the post-Cold War era, the global focus shifted towards human rights, democracy, individual freedom. The movement for civil rights, gender equality, and LGBTQ or plus right has gained prominence worldwide. In many regions, the fight for political freedom continues, with movement against authoritarianism in countries like Syria, Myanmar, and Belarus. The Arab Spring of 2011 was a significant series of protests against the Arab world, demanding democratic reforms, social justice, and end to corruption. While the movement brought some changes such as overthrow of dictatorial regime in Tunisia, Egypt, it also led a civil war in countries like Syria and Libya. Conclusion: the global freedom struggle is an ongoing journey. Each movement, whether successful or not, contribute to the collective understanding of human rights, justice, and governance. The lesson from this struggle underscore the importance of democracy, rule of law, the protection of individual liberties. As history continues to evolve, the fight for freedom remains a defining aspect of human civilization, constantly reshaping the world we live in today. The essence of this struggle is a reminder that freedom is neither free nor absolute. It requires constant sacrifice and the will of the people to preserve it. In the contemporary era, the global fight for freedom transcends border and focuses not only on political liberty but also on ensuring social, economic, and environmental justice for all. Slide